So I'm gonna stop you right there and reject that premise because every day is a beat. Like when I called you before, for the people who have somehow still in, I was just walking along the water and the beach. So I'm glad that you heard me the whole time. But
I kind of
yeah,
didn't, and
I did feel a couple empty. Okay, sure.
Yeah, I wanted you to feel like you could be on the beach in that moment and not have to come off of it. So that's why
No, I just would have went from the water to just like higher up in the sand. That's as far as I would have went.
Okay, we're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Soccerwise, baby, we are here. We are live for you on YouTube and Twitch and anywhere you get your podcast. David got some Tom Hoger for your Thursday show covering all things MLS, US Open Cup. You better believe it on a day like this. And of course, national teams here in North America. We have a little bit of news to get into on the national team front. Tom, have you heard? I didn't even have a fake story
Wait,
going.
what?
I was gonna throw in like the U17 beach soccer team had a big win yesterday.
But what if they did?
One.
Well, what if they did?
They may have. First of all, shout out to the beach soccer team.
Hell yeah.
Grinding through. Although I didn't hear enough of an uproar. They didn't get out of the group stage at the 2024 Beach Soccer World Cup in, I believe, Dubai. And I didn't hear enough of an uproar about that. So selective fandom, I guess, as you go along.
You be the change you wish to see in the world.
Be the change you wish to see in the world. We have big change, of course, coming as Gregg Berhalter has been let go as head coach of the U.S. men's national team on the verge of hosting a World Cup. Post Copa America, obviously the Olympics coming up on the men's side, not a senior tournament, and a big tournament for the women's side. So we're going to talk Gregg Berhalter. There is a big front office move in Toronto as Toronto FC looks to reset themselves and move forward in a different direction. We will, of course, talk Open Cup quarterfinals reaction. I need to apologize. I felt like I didn't have the juice on Tuesday. I felt like when we did Open Cup preview, I kind of threw it in on the side, discussed it a little and moved on. And then Indy 11 and then Sacramento. They brought me back, baby. So I am here for you. I've got the Vermont Green jersey on. I went to their Open Cup game earlier this year in the snow, which was epic. And I'm now bringing all that juice back for Open Cup. We're obviously, Tom, going to jump into the ice cream shop for all of Tommy's scoops as well as we get through this show. And we're going to talk a little shield race as well. You feel good?
I feel great. And Goss, to add on to the Vermont Green, when we were talking about let's do a show together, what would end up being Soccerwise was when we were at GA Cup, and one of the nights we were going to hang out, and I was looking forward to seeing you because I don't get to see you all the time. And you were like, dude, sorry, Vermont Green Open Cup game, I'm watching in my hotel room. I was like, Do you just want to watch it with me at the bar that's 3 minutes away from you? He's like, dude, second half already started. I'll see you in 45 minutes or after extra time. And I was like, I respect the hell out of that. I do.
Listen, the Carolina Core, we're trying to bring my squad down. I needed to focus all of my energies there. Yeah, that was a hilarious night because then I think I ended up coming out and talking youth soccer till 4 a.m. with
yeah, I had long left.
And all of that. Yeah, no, believe me. When everyone, by the way, I just want to put this out there. I think people know this, right? I've covered youth soccer in North America for over a decade at this point. It is one of the first conversations I have with people when I meet people from other countries or when I'm traveling. And people are always like, oh, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do it this way? For the most part, I have answers to all of those questions. So if you want those questions answered, join our Patreon, jump into our Discord, and talk about it with me. Because I have thought about all these things, and I've asked questions about all these things, whether we're talking about Europe or South Korea or Japan or South America or Central. Like, I have talked to people in all of these places about how youth development works where they are and what works and what doesn't. So if that's interesting to you for some ridiculous reason, like it is to me, join the Patreon, get involved, get into the Discord. We've got even more stuff coming with the Discord as we go along. Our depth charts are now fully out on the NWSL and MLS side for you all. That's what we use to keep ourselves up to date and monitoring everything that's going on. We, of course, are pulling from the mailbag there. We are chatting in there throughout the games. And as well, we're going to have some private shows and stuff like that coming for all of our subscribers. So a lot of exciting stuff going on there. Let's get into our first big topic, though. You can see it on the bottom if you are watching live. Gregg Berhalter is out as the head coach of the U.S. men's national team. Let me give a few quick facts out of the press release, and then we'll get into our conversation. So Matt Crocker, sporting director for U.S. Soccer, said, quote, "We are deeply grateful for Gregg for his commitment the past 5 years to the men's national team and to U.S. Soccer. Gregg has earned the respect of everyone within our organization, has played a pivotal role in bringing together a young team and moving the program forward. We wish Gregg all the best in his future endeavors, and we know he will find success in his next coaching position. U.S. Soccer is committed to doing what's necessary to ensure our success on the pitch. We are dedicated to fostering a culture that leads to winning. Our immediate focus is on finding a coach who can maximize our potential as we continue to prepare for the 2026 World Cup, and we have already begun our search process." So that is the comments from the man who is in charge now of this process of choosing the next manager. Of course, Matt Crocker was also the one who chose to bring Gregg Berhalter back after the first coaching search that happened under him as we move forward. So those are the exact comments. We talked about this coming out of the Uruguay loss in our live post-game show. So we've already touched on some of this. What do you make of things now, Tom, that they are official?
Yeah, I think, again, like we said on that show, the absolute necessary decision. It was one that didn't take very long. I know that there are some fans that kind of wish it happened a day or two after the tournament, but my biggest worry was that it was going to be, we need a comprehensive analysis of the tournament, what went wrong, and we're going to check out, where the moon was sitting on one of the match days. Did that impact? We want to uncover every stone and all of this before we make a decision, have every single data point in the world. What way was the wind blowing in South Sudan during that game? But thankfully, no, they regrouped for a week. Again, this is somebody that the Federation obviously has respect for, and they weren't just going to, 24 hours later be like, "You're fired." They had to have discussions, obviously. There's compensation because he's under contract, right? All of this is to say that a week, all things considered, is a solid timeline. And again, I understand that there are some people who might have wanted shorter, and that's fair enough too. But I'm glad that it didn't linger for too long. My next thought is two things can be true. One, it's absolutely the necessary decision. Not getting out of the Copa America group stage is inexcusable. No amount of context will make that okay and something that can be permitted. Again, there's the red card, the Timway, the whatever else. I do not care. They did not get out of the Copa America group stage. There was already issues coming into this tournament. This was the obvious decision that needed to happen. That being said, I'm a little bit annoyed at some of the conversations turning as if there has been no progress or there has been no good moments. I said something to the effect that the negatives the lows outweighed the highs, and someone was like, "Your commitment to shilling for U.S. Soccer is incredible." And I was like, because I didn't say that they're because I pretended like they didn't win trophies, right? I don't know, that part is frustrating to me. That's kind of been the pivot. There was one thing I was listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, and he's the podfather. All this, he was talking to U.S. Soccer, right? And one of the things he said on a show was like, this federation is worse than when he inherited it. And it just went by with absolutely no pushback, which I was like, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, just going nuts. Do you remember where we were at the end of 2018? Yeah. We just missed qualifying for the 2018 World Cup. They took a year to hire Gregg Berhalter, and all the things that they've done in terms of the continental success in Nations League, that's real, man. And yes, Mexico is a lower version of itself than it has been in the past. They're still winning those trophies. They're beating those teams. The dual national recruitment, extremely important. The Yunus Musa, Florian Balogun, these were not obvious ones. Ricardo Pepi, I forget if Sergiño Dest had committed or not before Berhalter took over. I don't believe that he did, but I don't know that off the top of my head. Regardless, that's 5 key players. And there's more down the list, players who haven't, hell, Andres Perea. That was a thing we talked about 4 years ago, and he committed to the United States. Obviously, he's not anywhere near the national team program. But, that's a real tangible thing. The culture has improved, the locker room, all this. There is a lot of things that went well, and the development of these players. We get ahead of ourselves in current talent versus potential. I think this group has a ton of potential. I still think it does have a lot of talent. It can still very much grow, but growth is that important explainer. They were the youngest team at the 2022 World Cup. They did not underperform at the 22 World Cup, and they did not overperform. Getting eliminated in the round of 16 by the Netherlands is exactly kind of where the expectations were. So, all of that to say, it's not like from day one this has been a disaster. And I just want to make sure that that context is not lost.
Yeah, I think you're completely right in there. I think anyone choosing to make revisionist history here is choosing their own agenda that they're going to push. Anyone who said that Gregg Berhalter wasn't qualified when he was hired is false, and they're changing the way that they're perceiving it at this point. And anyone who said the program's not in a better place right now is absolutely changing what has occurred and what has gone down. Just go back and think about when Dave Sarakin put CJ Sapong on the field in a friendly at Portugal like 2 months after they failed to qualify for the World Cup, and how bad things felt. Go back and think about this, the craze and the scare that went around when Jonathan Gonzalez chose to play for the Mexican national team over the U.S. men's national team right after they failed to qualify for the World Cup, and the U.S. was never going to get another player to come play for them, and that there was no talent coming through, and there was no core to the midfield, or no core to the team, and there was nothing going forward. And now look at where they sit now. Like 2019, I went to the friendly against Mexico where they were played off the field, and Tyler Adams was the only player who looked like he belonged on a field with the Mexican national team. Now, Mexico has descended into their own issues, but it felt like the gap was massive and was only going to get bigger. And now you're looking at a manager in Gregg Berhalter leaving who has won 2 CONCACAF Nations League and a Gold Cup over that Mexico group consistently, has reemerged for the U.S. They are going in the right direction. Things are positive. I think you hit the nail on the head in talking about 2022. It was the performance you needed from not having been in a World Cup to being the youngest team in a World Cup. The first step was to get on that stage, prove you belonged on that stage, and get some players some experience at that level. And that's what they did. Yes, I would have liked the Netherlands game to have gone better. I think anyone would say the same. But like, that's one of those things. And Bobby Warshaw and Matt Doyle did a post-game show with me around that World Cup, and they laid out the stats of like the core 12 teams in the world don't lose World Cup knockout games to other countries unless that country is a host. Like, it's not like, sometimes it happens. No. Go and look at every final 8 in a World Cup over the last 50, 60 years. It is the same 12 to 14 countries over and over and over again. You don't upset teams like that very often, as much as I would like for it to be the case. And look at the Euros, and look at Copa America, and look at the names that are in there. And Canada upset the apple cart, and that's awesome. But it doesn't happen very often. It should not be expected until you reach that point. And that's where I think the timing on this isn't terrible. I would have liked for this to have happened after the World Cup, for a new coach to have come in and had the full cycle and had the Copa America experience. You still have 2 years at this point, and the team is moving in the right direction, even with the mistakes that were made in Copa America. But to throw some numbers to what you said, Berhalter went 44, 17, and 13 in 74 games, 29, 9, and 7 in official competition, 2022 World Cup qualifier. He's the first former national team player to coach the U.S. at a World Cup, which is interesting. And of course, they were the youngest team at that tournament getting out. You mentioned Dest, you mentioned Balogun, Yunus Musa. Ricardo Pepi was one that we didn't know would choose the U.S. And as he made the decision, we sat down with him in LA at that All-Star game. I thought he was going to choose Mexico. Like, I was sure of it. Jesus Ferreira was one as well. Jedi, one that probably was never going to play for England, so one that you can kind of find. But I think on the dual national side especially, they created a culture where the players that came because they wanted to. And remember, like, Yunus Musa sat out that Nations League because he wasn't sure, and the U.S. handled it perfectly and then gave him the opportunity in the friendly. They didn't cap tie him before he was ready. Like, they gave him the option to sort of make the decision, but they set out a platform in which he was like, I want to be a part of this group. I want to be a part of this culture. I want to play for this team. So a lot of stuff positive going in this direction. There are a lot of negatives as well. Of course, the Copa America being at the top of that one. But, like, that's the reality. Like, that's what happens sometimes with young players in knockout competition. Let's talk about the future here. Let's talk about what happens next. We've got the list of names. We've heard the rumors around Jurgen Klopp. What do you make of, like, any potential that this guy
already said no? He already said no. He already said no.
You think that's a hard no?
Yes, I think that's a hard no. I think when he said no, that meant no. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. So now that he's out of the conversation, now I don't know that Tim Howard has gotten on the plane yet to convince him. I
I
don't
was gonna go with that joke
understand.
too.
Did Tim Howard play for Jurgen
I
Klopp
don't.
in a year that I don't know
I
about?
don't. I think that was a masterclass by the Daily Mail is what he was writing that column for, right? Masterclass in content and editorial. Like it was a good column. It was. I just don't know how real it was.
I didn't read the full article, so that's on me. I just read the headline and didn't understand it and moved on from there. I have a list of random names pulled from what other people have talked about, what I've thought through, potential. Do you have any big name you want to throw out first, or you want me to scroll through this? Also, anyone in the chat, feel free to throw your names in there as well. We already got the Klopp one.
Yeah. So even before we get to names, what I want to say is again that like we talked about, like, look, it is so much more fun to sit here and be like, Klopp, okay, let's call Zidane. Okay, let's call Pep.
Yeah.
Okay, right? But like, I just don't see that being realistic in any way. You go to the next tier, or I mean, again, we can disagree on where these tiers are, but like, a guy like Ralph Rangnick would be super exciting to me. But like, he just turned down Bayern Munich. Why?
Yeah.
Like, he's happy and successful at Austria. His contract just got extended. His buyout was reported to be $3 million. We didn't pay Gregg Berhalter. Like, that's like almost double what Berhalter's base salary was. I think his final compensation last year, the World Cup year, was like $2.2 million or something like that. It's like the buyout, let alone you still have to pay Gregg whatever's left on his deal, and you would have to also then put a very nice salary in front of Ralph Rangnick. So, all like the suggestions that I'm going to give when we get to it is probably going to be underwhelming, and I hope that I'm wrong in like thinking that I'm trying to be realistic, but like I don't think I am. There are some of these names that we're going to get to like at the top, like I said, like with Klopp. That's why I tried not to entertain it for a little while, and then I was like, all right, screw it, like. Let's have like, yeah, hey, if he says yes, like, again, there is some semblance of at least they tried. Like, and again, you don't raise the banner for that, but like, you know, if it was my like view of like, oh, that's unrealistic, don't even bother. So like at least they called, right? So like, I don't know where they're gonna go next, and maybe that means that they have a bigger budget than maybe I thought they did. If they thought they could at least tempt Klopp, or maybe it was just a PR thing, and like I kind of doubt that, but who knows?
I think coming out of the Canada hiring Jesse Marsch the way they did, your hope would be that there can be some creativity in saying like, this is the 2026 World Cup coach. Like, is there money that you can find for Canada? It was going to the 3 MLS clubs and saying, will you give money to pay? There are 25 MLS clubs in the US. Like, if it's that simple, then like go to them and say, do you guys want to pay for the MLS head coach of the US men's national team? And I think in the US, you also have a lot more money that's going around that you could try and get involved in, because you are right in like, this is the realm where US soccer lives in, and it is not the realm that these people are in. And your hope would be that this is the 2-year span where you can break that for this one-off job. The part that's hard for me is like, none of this is a guarantee. All of the big names we're going to talk about have never coached national team, and all of the national team coaches we're going to talk about are not the biggest names that have the most success. And so there's not like, to me, one clear name where you say like, of course, throw all the money in this direction and do it. Klopp was probably the closest you were going to get to that. I don't even understand the concept anyone has of like, oh, I'm burned out from running this club that's like almost as close to anything I could find that's home in my heart. Yeah, I want to go coach the U.S. men's national team. Like, I just don't even get where we all thought that any of this was possible, or anyone started bringing up the name.
I would push back on we all.
That he's available.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's fair. Some names coming into the chat right now. A few of them I think we have in here as well, in our rundown. So let's start with, I think the big names internationally behind Klopp, I think, are Thomas Tuchel, Pochettino. I think David Wagner would be a part of those as well. He will get mentioned. And then I threw in Javier Aguirre, which I think ESPN wrote this up in an article. I thought it was a good name to throw in there because he has done a similar thing with Mexico where he's come in late in cycles and helped them get over the top. Obviously, speaks Spanish, can connect to that part of the fan base, the team, the community, and coaching in La Liga has, I don't know, maybe a resume people will believe in. Those are some of the bigger names I thought of. Do any of those interest you?
No, you hadn't got to this one. I'll save it for the next one. But like, let me just kind of go one by one on those. Like, Thomas Tuchel, brother, we complained about Berhalter's tactics. Tuchel ain't exactly the most aesthetically pleasing head coach. 1, 2, not a very good manager. 3, Christian Pulisic and him are at odds. That doesn't make much sense to me. And he'd be super expensive on top. That's way too many question marks. Pochettino, yeah, maybe his stock has taken enough of a hit with Chelsea. And I don't even think that he was. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gus, but I thought a lot of the discourse around Pochettino leaving Chelsea was fans being like, "Oh my God, they fired him after a year. Are you kidding me?" So I don't know where his options are. I don't know where his head is at. I don't know if he wants to do international managing, and I don't know what his salary requests are. But if that's a realistic thing, I think that'd be a great call to have. David Wagner too, but again, he's as well as Pochettino, unproven at the international level. But obviously, Pochettino has had so much success with Tottenham and bounced around at some very big jobs as well that he would kind of take the precedence over that. And then how do I'm trying to frame this without sounding extremely dumb, and maybe I'm allowed to sound dumb on this. I don't particularly want somebody who's coached our biggest rival to be our head coach, and I don't think that sounds xenophobic, and please push back to me if it does. But I don't know. I don't see France hiring German coach or German France or whatever some of these rivalries. Croatian and Serbians, right? Stuff like that. I don't see that.
Portugal hired Roberto Martinez, who is Spanish and was Belgium's coach.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Honestly, to me, I'm not impressed by any of Javier Gary's teams. And
no,
it's not big enough for me to say that should be the guy. So either way, I don't think you're totally wrong. I mean, Piojo would be another one that would get mentioned in those where you're I think that's a little bit too much frenetic energy for this program right now.
And then in the chat, I'm trying to find SideQuest78 mentions Xavi, and he's not the first person to mention Xavi. 1, why would Xavi do it? But also 2, are we sure he's a good manager? And what has he done for the international? Yeah, that'd be a big name. Maybe that'd be cool. And again, maybe he'd do really well. But I don't think that he should be viewed as oh my God, drop everything to get Xavi.
Yeah. I think that's fair. And again, I think with most of these have not managed internationally. And so that's a really hard part of it. And then I can go through the international experts, quote unquote, which is what I call them. They're national team managers. So Willy Sagnol has done really well with Georgia. They have a clear, defined style of play. They have punched above their weight. They've been really fun. Obviously, he has a huge pedigree as a player as well. Yeah. So that's an interesting one. I think the other names on that list, we're hearing everyone's talking about Hervé Renard. Renard is one where this is what he does. He gets a team ready for a tournament. They overperform at that tournament, and then he kind of walks away. And that's sort of what you're looking for at this point. You are not looking for a manager who's going to reset youth development and change the flow of players and change coaching courses. That's not what's being asked in this job in this moment. So Hervé Renard's on that list. I think Thomas Christensen should be on that list. Panama coach right now. He's Danish, but he played and grew up in Spain for most of his life. Panama has played a really pleasing style for what they're capable of. They have also punched above their weight. I talked about Ricardo Gareca over a year ago when the World Cup cycle ended, and I thought the U.S. was going to hire a new coach. He emboldened a young Peruvian generation to do new things. That's kind of what you're asking him to do. He's currently Chile's coach. I don't see this Chile program going anywhere fast, and wouldn't be shocked if he tried to get his way out of that one. I've seen Jose Peckerman mentioned. I wrote down the corpse of Jose Peckerman because he's limping towards the end of the line here, and don't make him coach again. And then and that was my contingent of international managers. Do any of those pop out to you?
Yeah, so that's what I was getting. I know that sounded pretty negative on some of those other ones, and I do want to clarify with Xavi. I failed to say that not just the coaching point. Sure, yeah, he's a good coach, but I don't think that. More so tactical style, and I don't think that he should be viewed as in that same realm as if Klopp is interested, absolutely go get him, right? So this is kind of where I find it to be more realistic in terms of options and budget and profile and whatever, right? Thomas Christensen is somebody that I've talked to people a lot about, smart people within the game have said I think they should take a look at him, or they should call him, see what it's up, because he's done very well with Panama, as you said. Hervé Renard, like you said, if you want to go with pure tournament specialist, international manager specialist, yeah, I can absolutely get behind that as well. So yeah, those are a couple ones that I like.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of those. People in the chat also mentioning the U.S. soccer requirements that the manager speaks English, which I don't know if those still stand or if that's still a factor going forward, because you have to think for part of this for U.S. soccer, they have to reassess their standards and what they did. Like if they believe that things have gone wrong and they fired the manager that they hired, then you have to believe your process was wrong the first time to an extent. You have to be introspective. I'm not guaranteeing that. I just think that's part of what you have to do. So I would assume more of these things are on the table now going forward. If English is not a requirement, and I don't even know if he does or doesn't, but Marcelo Gallardo was another name that
I would,
popped
yeah,
up.
I would get behind that as well. I think that he seems more suited to club coaching, and I like a lot of these guys, but like, yeah, I would certainly interview him and see what he says, and then again, like, I don't know, and like that's kind of where a lot of this goes too. Like, we don't know exactly what these folks are saying in interviews or what their plan is, and like what it all looks like. So all we have is from the outside. A couple ones from the chat. That again, Patrick Vieira, like that'd be cool. Like I don't know if he's gonna leave Strasbourg, right? Like Matarazzo, same thing. Thierry Henry, like let's see what he does with the France U23s. Like maybe, right? Like that would be a good kind of test if he does really well. But if he does really well, he's probably gonna find another job, right? Like so, I don't know. Like I'm trying to be super nuanced with this, and that's kind of why I'm being like just like raining on the parade here, because a lot of these things sound cool in theory and are easy to say, and it's more fun to be like, yeah, go get Zidane, go get Klopp. But like in reality, it's like, okay, here's why it's not happening, or here's why it probably won't happen. And again, I know that I'm sounding cynical and whatever. It's less fun to do it this way, but that's like I don't have a lot of juice for things that are hypotheticals, you know.
So we do have apparently someone in the chat, Josh, says Gallardo turned down Ecuador today, which I think the U.S. hosting a World Cup, a country he's already lived in because he played for DC United, a little bit different than coaching Ecuador, even though I think there's a lot of promise in that national team. So interesting note, but I don't know that totally disqualifies.
No.
I believe he got let go from his Saudi Arabian club, and hence he's available right now.
He is absolutely available
out there. We have a question about Wilfred Nancy in here, and like we came into the post game Uruguay show, and I said Wilfred Nancy's name, and you called me a nerd, and you were like, "Get out of my face!" on this one.
Let's talk the MLS
options. Yeah, let's talk the MLS options though, because the reality of it is, and everyone can complain about what they want to. In the United States, the number one men's soccer division is Major League Soccer. It is the breeding ground for players, coaches, scouts, physios, everything. That's where a lot of soccer experience comes from. So the top of the heap right now, I think, is Steve Cherundolo, and obviously a USMNT veteran himself and all of his time in Germany. Wilfred Nancy is going to get mentioned as reigning coach of the year, as he should. Yep. I think Jim Curtin is the other obvious one as well. What do you make of the potential that one of them is the coach, or is there a name that I'm missing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if you said Steve Cherundolo. Again, I think all of these would be underwhelming, and like I would lean away from this, but as you said, right, wrong, or indifferent, they're gonna be in the mix. Like I can tell you, I've said this via sources. Like the expectation is Cherundolo is gonna get interviewed, and to go on Cherundolo's background, he's not like his coaching chops was in Germany. It wasn't like an MLS, like right, like in terms of his badges and everything and his schooling. The German Federation trusted him to run a youth national team, which I think speaks highly of him. And those were the pros, and like that's even me. Like I'd be like trying to talk myself, like right. Like again, I said on the front end, and I'm gonna say again, I would go in a different direction. I would exhaust all of those other options we've already talked about. There's a reason why we are talking about this section now, because we worked through all of those first tiers. So I would start higher, and then again, I think that they're going to be in the mix in some way or another, but I wouldn't make them top choices or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think to the same point I keep coming back to, none of these are obvious. It is big names who have never done it before that could be exciting. It's middle tier names that have never done it before that could be exciting. It's people who have done it before, but bringing Zambia to an AFCON final is different than the U.S. in the U.S. for a World Cup. So I think all of this is tough. I think that's where you probably ended up back on Gregg Berhalter the first time. Wasn't anything super obvious? Obviously, we have been on shows for 2+ years. I said Jesse Marsh at the time.
So I hope to have I still need to report out flesh out the reporting on this, but Yeah, it wasn't, and it wasn't the obvious choice with Berhalter. Like I said, like Marsh was very firmly like again, if you were gonna go like, and I thought they were gonna hire Jesse Marsh, and that's kind of where I was leaning.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And to be clear, I think what Canada did was awesome at this Copa America. It wasn't like clear cut obvious that everything he's going to do is going to work at the national team level. Like there are question marks with all of this because again, he's never done this before. He was Bob's assistant, but that was a different one as well. Should I throw Bob Bradley in here?
No.
In the conversation?
No,
I will say this about Bob. The way Gregg Berhalter is being discussed and perceived today feels a lot like when Bob Bradley left the national team. He was that weird interim manager when he took over for a year plus because Sunil was still chasing Jurgen Klinsmann around LA to see if he could pin him down and get him to take the job. Bob managed them very well in that time, took over permanently, Confed Cup final, 2010 World Cup, and then after the Gold Cup and the loss, the 2-0 loss against Mexico, he gets fired, and all of a sudden, Bob Bradley's the worst manager in the world, and all of it's terrible, and the national team program's falling apart, and all of that. And then Bob went out and sort of forged his own path, the Egypt job, going to Europe, ending up at Swansea, and then the team he built at LAFC. If I had said I thought Bob Bradley was a soccer genius in 2011 and 2012, everyone would have screamed at me in the chat the same way they do when I say that about Gregg Berhalter. So let me go there now. Where does Gregg Berhalter land? Like, he's not done. And I said it on the last show. Smart soccer people around the world who have no connection to the Berhalter family and USSF have tried to hire him over the last 2 years for what we would consider high-profile soccer jobs. Mm-hmm. So if he wants it, there's more jobs out there. Do you think he lands in MLS? Do you think he lands as a coach or a GM, sporting director? Where do you think the future is for him?
I hope that he goes abroad. I do. But I think that it's more likely he ends up at MLS because, and this mirrors like the Weston McKennie conversation we were having, the highest contract offer and the most control is going to come from an MLS club. Like, Sparta Prague is a team that's open right now. Would they be interested in Gregg Berhalter? Like, I don't think that, like, Jesse Marsh climbed the ladder in Europe before he got leaked.
Great beer.
I agree. But I'm saying, but like, you know, what's his, the former FC Cincinnati GM, Gerard Nijkamp, tried to hire Gregg for Sparta Rotterdam. We're talking about Sparta Rotterdam, or we're talking about, I don't know, like a mid-table Dutch team kind of thing, right? Rather than PSV or Ajax. Like, I think those are the
speaks Dutch.
Well, so but my point is that like I think it's more likely to be a club like Sparta Rotterdam than it is to be a club like Ajax or PSV. And if you're Gregg Berhalter, would you rather do that and take a pretty significant pay cut from what he's making at US Soccer and what he can make in MLS, or will he end up like like Chicago Fire is going to be what I would say. If they came to him and said, "We're gonna you get to have as much control as you want. Here's a lot of money too," right? Like, hell, I'd probably take that, man. Like, I hope that he goes to Europe, or like again, Club America. That was a real thing. Like, one of the reasons he didn't get the Club America job or it didn't go further is because he said, I'm not taking another job until they hire somebody else at the U.S. men's national team. So, like, that would be pretty cool, and like that wouldn't last very long because that's what happens in League MX. Just the shelf life on head coaches is pretty short.
Right.
But again, I hope that that's what's going to happen. But I feel decently strongly that it's going to end up in MLS just because the finances and the control.
I agree with you. I think Bob had to go and do it on his own, in his own path. What Jesse Marsh did was unique. The Red Bull connection was unique. Now, Gregg played in Europe. He actually has already coached in Europe, technically, with Hammarby because of the AEG connection, which, again, unique. You mentioned PSV in there. Ernie Stewart running the show. You can mention Feyenoord as well with Dennis de Kloese running the show. Like, maybe those are clubs where they see what Gregg Berhalter is capable of from a soccer point of view, less from a Americans can't coach here, all that type of thing. And maybe they give him a shot. But otherwise, I think you're right. You're talking mid-tier in Belgium, where teams take risks and teams try new things and they want to develop young players and push them and things like that. And I think you're talking mid-tier in the Netherlands as well, or maybe German, lower Bundesliga, second division, where he, once again, played, has experience. And remember, like, he has spent the last 5 years just going to games in front offices and sitting and talking soccer and meeting people and creating connections to try and help get players to camps and negotiate with teams and all of those types of things. So he has a lot of those connections. In MLS, you mentioned Chicago. They are the obvious one. He already lives there. They are a desperate team. Quite honestly, for the growth of soccer, that's what I want, because Chicago is a sleeping giant, and I would love to see them wake up. And I can tell you from watching Gregg's Columbus Crew teams, that was a team with no money. The only year they didn't make the playoffs, because I went back and skimmed through, was the year where they traded Kai in May at the start of the year and didn't have a replacement. He flipped Kai Kamara and made him a Golden Boot winner into Ola Kamara and made him a Golden Boot contender into Giassi Zardes. That was the run he went on, and Pipa Higuain was really the only true DP in those teams. He brought Arthur to MLS and had success with him. He built one of the best back lines in the league. Harrison Awful they brought in as well, who was a huge contender for them year after year. Those Crew teams were legit. Chicago spends on a different level than pretty much any other team in MLS, and I think he could be a real game changer for that club, and that would be, I think, a positive thing for Major League Soccer. None of the other current openings make sense for him.
I mean, Atlanta might, because Garth Lagerway, I don't know, I don't know if that's a perfect fit or not, but I think that's at least on the table. With all of the, and I run out of juice for this too, and I know that we've gone longer on this topic than but just looking at the chat, it's MLS isn't his level, USL is his level, and it's just I don't know where to go from here, right? That's kind of why that's another reason why I'm selfishly, I also hope that he goes to Europe or somewhere else, but maybe we won't hear about it on a day-to-day basis. But that's where we're at. It's all good fun.
Yeah, BJ Callahan heading to Nashville, of course, because he has gotten that job. So there's going to be a lot of changeover in U.S. soccer going forward, and of course we will have all your coverage here at Soccerwise. Every single week, we are here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time live, available wherever you get your podcast, plus the weekend recap show, which you can subscribe to the Patreon, jump into the Discord, and be involved with as well. Let's continue talking changes. Toronto FC has let their president go in Bill Manning. It apparently is a mutual parting between the two, the same way that my sweat mutually parts from my body every time I do this show in 97-degree weather in my apartment. So that is what we are being told. Bill Manning joined the club in 2015, two-time Executive of the Year, coming over from RSL, who of course were extremely successful before that, winning an MLS Cup, making it to a CCL final, and then going through things. But Toronto have not qualified for the playoffs since 2020. Greg Vanny left the club. They've had a huge changeover in terms of personnel on the roster. They've gone through, 4 coaches in that time as well. Bob Bradley, Chris Armas have been in and out. Terry Dunfield as an interim, and now have landed on John Herdman. Ended up losing yesterday in the first leg of the Canadian Championship to the local CPL side Forge, and Bobby Smirniotis' group 2-1 down in Hamilton. Second leg coming up back in Toronto after this one. This comes off the back of a couple big defeats in Major League Soccer. Now I'm talking about the on-field results because Bill Manning is president of the team. The sporting structure, the way it is set up in Toronto, sat underneath him. So in some clubs, it doesn't. In some clubs, they are separate entities that report into a larger company that owns the team or reports into one position, however it's structured. Bill Manning, as time went along in Toronto, moved from purely in charge of the business side of this organization to overarching on top of the business and sporting side. That is part of the reason why Tim Bezbatchenko won an MLS Cup in Columbus, because Tim Bezbatchenko was in charge of the sporting side. That's the way the club was moving. And on top of many other things, he's from Columbus, obviously the Save the Crew movement, a lot of other things. Tim Bezbatchenko chose to go to Columbus, where he then won a lot of stuff. It's also part of the reason that Garth Lagerwey left RSL and became in charge of sporting in Seattle, where he won 2 MLS Cups. Does that number feel right? And went to 4, I believe so, plus a couple Open Cups on the side there. And I believe a supporter shield as well. My understanding, what I hear from people who work under Bill Manning and around him over the last decade plus in Major League Soccer, is that he is good at the business side, stuff that he does, but likes to get overly involved in the sporting side of things and believes that he is the one who can make the difference and change things. And I think you see the direction for TFC that they've gone to as he's gotten more and more control. And it is why My texts are blowing up today from Toronto fans saying was losing to Forge maybe the best result Toronto has had in the last few years. I'm saying all of this to put into place why we're talking about a president leaving so high in this show and why I think it is such a big deal for the future of this club.
Yeah, I think you laid it out. It's kind of been the rub. It's like when Bezbachenko left, the wheels started falling off, and that's when Bill Manning was getting more and more power within the sporting side of things. There's no coincidence that, again, causation, correlation, whatever you want to say. Bez left, Corey Ray left, Sean Rubio left. Help me out here. There's plenty of more. Jackson Dodd left. You go on down the list. Jason Hernandez, who's the current sporting director, who I think was a very good hire, and I think is doing a very good job. And we'll see what else he can do now that he's unquestionably leading the sporting department. He's like just about the only person that was brought in before this year. And as you say, all of these, was Issa Tall with him there? I don't, whatever it was. A few people went
at some point. He was in the club. Yeah.
So like, but just look at
left,
all,
I believe, to go to UEFA.
All of those talented technical staff or front office people. Like Ali Curtis came in with
teams
fired.
Across MLS.
Right. They all left and there wasn't really replacements. And one person remained the entire time until today.
Yeah, it is a huge moment. I mean, we know how involved he was in the designated players that were chosen, and Insigne and Bernadeschi have shown their quality at times. At other times, it's been part of what's held this club back. But I think in general, the lack of coherent roster structure and the lack of plan going forward. And Greg Vanney, like, huge part of this. Greg Vanney competed for Supporters Shield, went to multiple MLS Cups, won an MLS Cup, was competitive throughout. His time finished, and yeah, he's a former LA Galaxy player. He wanted to go back to California, but if he saw the project going in the right direction, I think he was going to stay in Toronto. And I think that's what you talk about with a lot of these people.
Part of the discussions with Vanney was that they weren't going to give him increased sporting decision control. That was part of it. Like, he was open or ready to saying the Galaxy, again, he had the ties to the club, but they were saying that, you'll have a big voice in these player decisions. And that was something that Bill Manning and Toronto were not going to do. And that's part of the reason why he left.
So it is a big moment for Toronto FC, a big moment for the club. I think currently now the head of the business and sporting side, you mentioned Jason Hernandez, are going to report directly into MLSE. Remember, this is like a massive organization. That was part of what has gone down, which is the people in charge of MLSE are not checking in on TFC day in and day out. All of this really sat under Bill Manning. So this is a huge change for this club, and it's necessary. Like, it is necessary at a time where I think John Herdman's shown some good, some bad stuff. And I don't know if he will be the guy long term, but when you talk about a giant in MLS, you talk about Toronto from 2014 to 2019. You talk about a club in a major city that was a major player as they won trophies and everyone was out on the streets celebrating. That when they played games, it was on a TV in every single bar. Like, that stadium was sold out. Raptors players are coming to sit fieldside and want to be a part of it. Like, that's what Toronto is capable of. They are hosting the World Cup in that city in 2026. It's going to be a huge deal. They need to be on the right path going forward as they expand that stadium. Like, they can fill that building. They could fill 35, 40K week in and week out if they are competitive and if they are on the right track. They have not been over the last 4 years, and the hope is that this can get them back to it. I mentioned their loss to a CPL side in Canadian Championship play. Let's talk US Open Cup, baby. Because as I said, I wasn't there on Tuesday. I think it had just been too long, wavering in and out of league play. We've got Copa America going on. We've got Euros. We've got all these things happening. And then you sit down and you say, Indy 11 on the field at Kennesaw State, Augie Williams doing the business. This is what I live for. This is my Roman Empire. This is what I'm thinking about now. This is what I need to be living in. This is what I need to be doing. Up the greens, as Sam Minton said in the chat as well. The first cup set in the opening game, Atlanta put together a fairly strong group for what
as strong as they
available.
Could. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Daniel Rios starting at center forward, that would be like the one.
Yeah, that's fair.
Even a debatable one, probably at times as you go through. Saba Lobsanitsa on the field. He struggled.
Muyumba.
He wasn't able to create chances, but Indy came out. They get the lead early. They make it 2 off the Dax McCarty own goal late on. They get the win, a great traveling support. And then on the back of that, I turn on the Sacramento game, and it is like legit. That atmosphere was on fleek. You're welcome for that one. It was exactly what you want to see. Seattle goes down there like, this is what's exciting. This is what's fun. It's a different atmosphere than what we're used to every week. It's a different setup. It's a different style. I thought Seattle was very good in the game and the soccer they played. They deserved to win. They were easily the better team in the first half. Sacramento hits back with the early goal in the second half. And then they pushed a little bit. But, like, this is why the Open Cup is great. Being able to say Indy 11 had a cup set at Kennesaw State University, like, that's all I want in life.
And I'm gonna go. That's where I wanted to go with this. So Caleb Wiley's playing his last game for Atlanta United. It gets to be a send off. It's a home game. So this kid who's about to leave for the Olympics, so he's gonna go represent his country at the Olympics. He's about to do an $11 million transfer to Chelsea, loan to Strasbourg. Some of the, these huge competitions, huge names. I want a farewell match with my club, and I turn on the game, and the TV, the camera angle is facing the completely empty stands at Kennesaw Stadium, and he's playing against the Indy 11, and this is his farewell game. I was like, God, I love the duality of this, of, like, again, like, particularly, like, the luxury of Chelsea coming in with an $11 million bid. This kid's destined for stardom. This is such a hot, like, all this, and a big MLS team, and then it's like this game. My farewell match is looking at empty seats at Kennesaw Stadium and getting dominated by the Indy 11.
Getting dominated. We talked a little bit about what Indy had in this one on Tuesday. Of it feels like right now that they are in danger in their standing in the city because of these potential MLS bids that they are not a part of. That's something that affects the players, the coaches, the front offices, and the ownership all the way through. And, like, I think you saw them play with a little bit of that grit. First of all, shout out to Cam Lindley, whose fitness is outrageous. He did a halftime interview coming off the field at it's 95 degrees at 107% humidity, and they're asking him questions, and he's, like, not even breathing that heavy. He's like, yeah, they have Daniel Rios on the bench. I'm like, whoa, dude, you should be broadcasting from the field. Like, I finished my game on Tuesday night, and I'm huffing and puffing, and no one is running in that game. I can promise you that, and I sweat for another 7 hours as I cool down from that game. So shout out to Cam Lindley. Respect for that. But this was awesome. It was a big deal. It felt really special. It felt really fun. I will say for Caleb Wiley, from a lot of what I know in Europe, like, you're going on loan, you better start learning half-filled Kennesaw State, because if you're playing in the bottom of Ligue 1 or Ligue 2 and Belgium and wherever the hell else Chelsea likes to send players, like,
he's going to Strasbourg.
All right. Well, we think. Relax.
Patrick Vieira.
Shout out to Patrick Vieira, who we didn't mention, by the way. I don't think.
He got a drive-by from me. It should have been a little. But, like, again, my assumption is I don't know if he's going to leave Strasbourg. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Go on.
Yeah, I would kill for Patrick Vieira, though, as, like, a human being, if he asked me to. If he said, I need you, like, Tom has done things you don't need to know. Trust me. You have to take Tom out. I'd be like, I have to take Tom out. He's on that list. Vieira and Simeone are on that list. But if they asked me to, I would do it.
Hurtful.
Because you got to make an example at the top. You always got to start with the biggest name, and Tom Bogert is the biggest name. Last night we had SKC-FC Dallas, wild game at SKC, weather delays.
Did that ever end? I was assuming that I was going to wake up and they were still playing because of the rain delay.
I have no idea. I went to a Colombian bar to watch the Colombia game, so I did not watch live, just following on my phone, and watched it back this morning for a little bit, and then it closed out with LAFC against New Mexico, a game I think I was really excited about. New Mexico was not capable of performing at the level I was hoping for. The early goal from Tillman, I think, really affected that. This was one of the ones, and we have a few comments in the chat right now about lower division teams should always host.
I firmly agree
ideas
with that.
About Open Cup. I don't know that I agree on a blanket thing.
Fair.
Because I don't know, that's a little tough. But this was a game where the stadium was half filled. 32-52 was elite, but the New Mexico away section was unbelievable. So when you watch the game, even if you just want to go check highlights or just bring it up so that you could see this, on the right side behind the right goal, there was a yellow section that was as big as any away section I've seen in MLS. Like, they don't give the Galaxy as much space as they could, obviously. And it was awesome. High energy, all yellow. And, like, New Mexico is one of those teams you want to see host.
I believe that the New Mexico ownership set that up. Like that was a New Mexico United thing, and like I thought it was really cool.
Nice.
This was something that has been in the plan since the draw, and they were kind of figuring
Mm-hmm.
out how do we get there where we do. All right, how are we gonna? What's the best way to bring folks? And like that was something. So again, shout out to New Mexico for that. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I guess there's an obvious way to figure this out of like, here's the teams that want to host, here's sort of the process, and if the lower division team asks to, then maybe they get priority in that matchup against an MLS team where because some lower division teams don't want to host. Like they don't have their own facility. They can't guarantee that it's at the USSF, like US soccer levels that it needs to be. So then it costs more money, or they don't know that it's not part of their ticket package. They don't know that they can get fans out. Like there are things that happen where some lower division teams don't want
that's
to.
fair. That's fair.
You can't pigeonhole it in. But I do like the idea of having it as often as possible. I think it grows the game. I think it pushes a lot of things. Obviously, I'm talking about this going to the Vermont game earlier this year. I've been to a bunch of like random Open Cup games in New Jersey and out in Brooklyn and all these other things where NPSL teams in, at the time USL or PDL, now USL2 teams like host and whatever. And yeah, it's really fun. It's really, really cool. It is one of the things I think that makes the Open Cup unique, which is one of the things I think makes soccer in America unique to NBA, MLB, NFL. And like, if that's what you're fighting against, that's part of the argument. You're battling EPL and Copa Libertadores and Liga MX and Brazilian League and, Bundesliga and all this, but you're also battling American sports leagues. And this is the unique thing. Like this is Summer League times 100 for a lot of different areas that you can build up and go to. So I think it's really cool. The semifinals are coming up on August 27th and 28th. SKC will face off against Indy, and LAFC will face off against Seattle. Really good semifinal. Like you've got a Midwesty clash between SKC, who, well, because I know I'm going to get yelled at.
I love that. No, I was appreciating it. I wasn't giving you crap.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I've spent a lot of time in Indianapolis over the last 2 years, so I probably should know that a little better. And
sick flex. That is such a sick flex. It's unreal.
Will correct me, bro. I kind of like know Indy. Like, I gotta tell you though, Shapiro's Jewish Deli in Indy, that place is legit. So respect to anyone who's like,
what do you get?
I don't live in New York.
What's your order there?
Know. I mean, you always got to go hot pastrami on rye.
Okay.
With spicy
if I had to guess,
like, don't overcomplicate it. You don't need multiple meats in there. Like it's the best one. It's got the best flavor. It's got the best bite. And I was in recovery mode the first time I went there, so I went matzo ball soup as well. Because I was like, I was struggling.
Is that a hangover cure?
It was a bit of a New Orleans trip around Mardi Gras. So
I'm asking is matzo ball soup is that a hangover cure? Is that a thing? Because it's pork roll and cheese for me.
For it. Nice. You have to go to New Jersey real quick.
Yeah, obviously, I had a pork roll and cheese this morning. Then went to the beach. What's up?
That's a good day. I would say what I ended up doing was square knish with a little spicy mustard. So you get the fry in there, you get fried food in there, and you got and you get the matzo ball soup, the warm, the cozy, the filling. So it's legit. It's very good. So that's one matchup, and then you get LAFC versus Seattle on the other matchup, which we've seen them play great games. It is a big time opportunity at a trophy. The opportunity to host a final for both of them huge. So like this is going to be, I think, as good a semifinal as you can get set up, which is nice. And I think for me, by the way, part of Open Cup is just like the discourse over the last year sucked because of what's happened, because MLS has pulled all these teams out and affected the way the competition is set up. And like, it has become all this like culture war stuff, which I understand the frustration from everyone. It, I think, pulled away some of my acknowledgement of why I love it. And then it came back when you finally saw it out on the field. I hope it's recovered to what it should be going forward, because I don't need to see more two teams ever. And I don't need to see more two teams in US Open Cup as we go along. Let's head into the ice cream shop.
Let's do it.
Let's get to Tommy Scoops now. Let's get to your star role on this show. The only place to come and get Tom Scoops live twice a week. All things North America, whatever's going on. Get us started.
Yeah, we'll start with Red Star Belgrade had an offer around $8 million rejected for Facundo Torres, the Orlando City star, Uruguay international, though he wasn't with the Copa America team. I would be shocked if this is anywhere close to Orlando's valuation. I would also be surprised if Red Star would be the team that got up there, both in terms of transfer fee and salary for Facundo Torres. And that's not a disrespect to Red Star. It's just this isn't a team that spends $13 million on transfer fees and then whatever Facundo Torres would make on a salary. So that's ambitious. Well done by Red Star for trying, but I don't know. I'm just assuming that that's not something that's going to continue to progress.
How long do you think he plays for Orlando?
That's a great question, and I've kind of gone back and forth on it. And like I kind of tried to ask some folks, and it was more like, we'll work with Facundo. He's happy. Like it's not like he's pushing his way out or anything. Again, he's under contract for I believe another 2 years with a 2-year extension or option to extend by the club. So he's under team control for a long time. And when he signed that last contract, I figured that wasn't a he's going to stay here forever. But like, okay, this isn't something that you need to be monitoring for this summer.
Right.
And I think that's still the case. Again, right? Like if a La Liga team comes in with a $13 million bid, $15 million, whatever it is, they probably take that. But I don't think that's on the cards. But what the hell do I know?
Yeah. You can go and read about a lot of these, by the way, at Give Me Sport, one of the new homes for Tom Bogert. Not as homey as Soccerwise, but I'm not. That's my words, not yours.
Never is.
You don't have to say anything. Keep us rolling here, though. I believe Atlanta. We talked about this last time after the Caleb Wiley sell and the Bucco Bucks coming in. What's the latest report on their DP spots?
Yeah, they have an executive in Italy right now discussing the deal with Atalanta for Alexei Miranchuk. This would be again Atalanta. I believe Fabrizio Romano reported that Atalanta want 15 million. So if we had to deduce something, maybe in that 12 or 13 range could get it done. And I don't have any inside information on this, but I'd say if Atlanta are bidding 10 million, getting to 12 or 13 is not a stretch. If Atalanta hold and dig in and say, nope, 15 or he stays, I would be very surprised if they did that. But if they do, then the deal could be in jeopardy. But at this stage, I'd be pretty optimistic if I was an Atlanta United fan on this one. But again, that's more so hearsay. That's more so, me reading into it rather than me I've heard this from 5 people who said no, it's about to happen, right? Like I think that this makes a lot of sense for all parties, and I think it makes a lot of sense that again Atlanta United sent over an executive there like that. That's a let's go get this deal done move. That's not a hey, let's talk about it, figure it out. I'm gonna fly back to Atlanta and we'll talk about it more. That's a no. Let's get an agreement and let's get this done.
Okay. I think exciting for Atlanta fans. We talked about the move a little bit on Tuesday. He is a ball-playing number 10 who you can control the game through a little bit, and that is where I think we both agreed a good starting point for this Atlanta team to rebuild things. I think you saw the lack of ideas against Indy 11. Like Saba had the dangerous free kick where he tried to sneak it to the near post. There's little ideas in there and obviously some quality. He is not a guy who you build an attack through and dominates the game, but he could be a game changer with the right guy alongside him, and that's what they're looking for right now. Let's go to Portland now, because you've had a few different conversations, as well as I think they've officially signed someone.
Yes, and before I get into Portland, I'm going to remind me at the end of this that there's one thing that we haven't prepped for that I'm just going to come up with. Anyway, Portland Timbers.
You want to just let it rip right now?
Yeah, sure. And it's a minor thing. So there's been a lot of rumors around in Europe that Panathinaikos have made a bid for Xherdan Shaqiri. They have not officially made a bid yet. I don't believe that they've talked to Chicago yet, but it seems like there's legitimate interest there. And if they're making a bid to sign him now, I'd again, if I'm Chicago, I'm driving him to the airport or stays. Hey, I don't know if he's not back in training yet. And Frank Klopas said in the media, he was asked about it. It was like, hey, this is normal. He was just at a long tournament, all that stuff. And that's true and that's fair. But I think the other side of this is there's no secret that, again, Shaqiri said it publicly that Shaqiri wants to leave. And the club are obviously fine with him leaving to open up a DP spot. So that's also part of the context there. And again, Panathinaikos, if that's something that Shaqiri is interested in, I think that it would not take very much for that to get done. But as I'm being told right now, there is no bid, no official bid.
That is wild, mainly just because was not the team I thought we'd be talking about today. So that gets me stoked. Obviously, Olympiacos and Ike Athens are the ones that have spent a little bit more money, but Panathinaikos are chasing uphill to chase those teams, and it is the profile of player that has come into the league over the last few years, right? When you look at the Olympiacoses of a Rivaldo comes at the end of his career, and like guys like that, and some of the players playing. in that
James is there a little bit.
yeah, exactly. So it makes sense, and Athens is sick. So like, go live in Athens, Shaqiri, and clearly no one wants to be a part of this anymore. So whatever anyone can do to get out, that would be big, and obviously would be huge for Chicago going forward. So that Gregg Berhalter can rebuild things in Chicago with an open DP spot or 2 open DP spots.
And maybe Gaston Jimenez to South America. I was told that there wasn't an official bid there yet, but that I think that's another similar. Like, I think Gaston Jimenez has been a little bit better this year, and the fact that he can be bought down off a DP spot helps. But again, that would be a significant salary to continue the roster evolution. But anyway, we got we're up to Portland now. Portland Timbers. They're completing the signing of a New Zealand youth international center back, Finn Sermon, from Wellington Phoenix. Sermon has 1 cap with the New Zealand senior national team. The 20-year-old center back, he's not a U22 initiative signing, so it's not an expensive deal. It's something that they're very excited about because they love his talent, they love his potential. He was in Portland completing his medical this week and going to join up with the New Zealand squad ahead of the 2024 Olympics. So Portland Timbers fans, check out a couple New Zealand games at the Olympics, and we'll see how if Sermon's playing. And Michael Boxall, I just got the release today. He's
I got that email too.
I love that. I got really happy about it. I don't know why. Like, it just made me very happy. So that's going to be cool. Anyway.
I was literally about to drop that and be like, hey, if you want to go watch Michael Boxall for New Zealand at the Olympics, you could do that as well.
So yeah, Finn Sermon. What I was told is that like St. Louis were interested in him as well. I know that they signed, I believe it was an Australian defensive mid center back. Please, I hope it was. What I'm interested in is if this is going to start to open the down under market for MLS, like Australia and New Zealand, because there are interesting players to be found there. And again, this is one that's pretty cost effective for Portland. They're really excited about the potential here and the high upside. Their further summer plans are, and I believe I've said this on previous shows, but I can say definitively they plan to bring in a central midfielder. I feel really strongly that they want to use a DP spot in center mid, and I think that's what's going to happen. But who knows what happens when whenever deals start to get done, and if you could reclassify. But the assumption is, the plan is a high impact signing at central midfield. That also would mean somebody would leave. And I've been talking. I feel pretty strongly it's going to be Eric Williamson, or at least I think it's going to be. But I was told that it's not going to be both. It's not going to be none of Eric Williamson or Christian Paredes, and it's not going to be both. One of those two. And I was told that there is also interest in Christian Paredes if he would be the one to be moved. So if they trade Paredes, they're not trading Williamson, and vice versa. What I was told is that there's plenty of interest in Eric Williamson around MLS, and that's only going to really heat up now over the next couple weeks because the transfer window opens on July 18th in MLS. And obviously it's probably going to coincide with if and when Portland do get the signing over the line. So there's a couple moving parts here, but clubs around MLS know that Williamson and Paredes are available, and I want to, clarify that to make it seem like it's not a foregone conclusion that it is going to be Williamson, but in my expert opinion, I think it's going to be, but it still could be Paredes.
Shout out to DVN and Holmes from the Discord, who basically asked this question. He said Tom's mentioned Williamson in the past. Where would you see him land, and are there other fringe guys you could see moving? How could a player like this maybe affect a playoff race? So let's talk Eric Williamson specifically, but with Paredes. When Eric Williamson is good, he is great. He has been hurt a lot, and it sucks. I have an Eric Williamson jersey that the Portland Timbers sent me.
Sick.
So shout out to Kevin Acevedo, who's the legend and the GOAT, doing big things now with LA Galaxy. I'm a huge fan of Eric Williamson. I think one of the things that's really nice is he's versatile. He could be an 8. He can be a 10 in the right type of teams. He can play in a dual 8. He can play in a dual 10. He can play in a lot of different setups. I don't know that I would put him in a pressing team out the gate. And because one of the names that pops to mind is Philly, where it's this is a Philly move, right? There's a Julian Carranza style of sort of distressed asset. Can we go get him? Obviously, the Colorado Rapids pop to mind. They don't need him right now.
No,
he would go into a midfield group that he would be good in, but he's not the biggest need.
So Colorado are going to add a defensive midfielder, but they want somebody with bite, not because Williamson's strengths are going going and Colorado doesn't have the space. He's
very similar to Ronan. He's very similar to what Cole Bassett's been
playing recently. So again, I like the idea, but yeah.
So let me throw RSL out there. Ooh. You're amping things up, you're trying to push things, but you are not going to go out and drop $20 million on a DP. He could be your 10 for now, and I think he's better than Matt Crooks and what he brings if that's who's playing in there. I think he can swap in and out with Luna if that's what you're doing. I just think he's another piece alongside Ojeda and Nelly, and when Pablo Ruiz even comes back, where again he's versatile, he can fit with a lot of different players like this, and I think his interchange and quick play of like getting the ball out of his feet for a Chicho Arango through ball, I think all of that could be super dangerous.
I think that I think he'd be an improvement on Matt Crooks, but I would be disappointed if I was an RSL fan, and I believe that RSL fans will not be disappointed this summer. Is kind of where I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay. The Revs are always an obvious one because they're a struggle, and
DC comes up for me too. Charlotte comes up for me too, and I kind of I completely hijacked that, and screw you. I'm going to keep it for another minute. Charlotte makes a little bit of sense, or a lot of sense to me, because they, like, again, they're going to sign a DP9 before a DP10, and I don't know if they're going to be able to sign a DP10 this summer because it depends on if Torres leaves or not.
Right.
So Williamson, not a bad option to have as a free 8 or a 10-ish player in this 4-2-3-1, this 4-3-3-ish, right? Like that could make sense. I don't know how much I'd love his fit on turf after obviously his injury history, but I think that was one that came to mind. DC United, I think they would love to have him, but like you said, I don't love him in a pressing system, and there's still some animosity there. I'll just leave it at that. DC had Eric Williamson's homegrown rights, never signed him to a contract, and held him for ransom pretty hard.
Maryland, yeah.
For Portland to sign him, it was like a lot of allocation money and like a 50% sell on. It was they really held out for those rights. So I don't think Eric Williamson loves DC United, if I had to guess, but hey, who knows? Maybe a new contract helps.
Let me throw out two more. One is Austin. They just need talent. They just need more players. And like, again, he fits in a lot of different ways. He's very good. And I think he could be really interesting there. And then the other one is Columbus. And like, I know they just gave up some for AZ Jackson. He's not an Aiden Morris replacement, but he fits the team. I think he fits the style. I think Nansei could do a lot of great things with him. And you just add more talent into central midfield.
Yeah, I mean, Columbus is my dream here, and that's probably just, like, aesthetically pleasing. That'd be awesome in that, like, I don't know how much they'd win the ball in central midfield, but my God, you'd never get it off of Nagby and Eric Williamson. Like, that would be so much fun.
Paredes, if he's available, I think most teams would be interested. He has less of a ceiling than Williamson. The last year and a half has been the best year and a half of Paredes' career. He has really settled. He is not the 6 they bought him to be. He is not the Diego Chara replacement. He is more of an 8 who covers ground, but is not going to be the one that protects your back line.
No.
DC would have been an obvious one here, but they've now, it sounds like, made their signing in that central midfield area alongside Patola. And so there's not a team that doesn't need an 8. I don't know that anyone's going to give up a ton for Paredes, though. At this point, he does have a green card, I believe, so he doesn't take up an international spot, but I don't think it changes anyone's world as you go forward. But pretty much anyone who made that trade, I would be like, oh yeah, cool. You're better today than you were yesterday, on the field, day in and day out in Major League Soccer. You mentioned Charlotte. Let's close with Charlotte here, because we've had like a million questions about Malanda and all these things going on with them.
Shout out to Discord. So again, like this is something that we talked about on Tuesday about if and when they sign Tim Ream, does that mean Malanda's leaving? Like, I know that they pointed to me. I know your reporting is they don't want to lose him, but like, should we be reading between the lines? And I reassured, I was like, no, like they are absolutely intent that he is not leaving this summer. We don't care, whatever, right? And then they signed him to a new contract that was announced today. That is super exciting. And again, as a Charlotte fan, you should be excited. That doesn't mean he's going to stay through the end of the contract, but that means that, one, he's happy to stay in Charlotte this summer and maybe through the winter, right? And maybe it's the next summer. And also, you're in a much stronger position when it comes to negotiating transfer fees. And thirdly, this is how you treat a player who's absolutely overperformed since he's come in, and this is how you keep players happy too. Hey, we get it. You said that you didn't want to, if you're an agent in this situation. We get it. You said that you don't want to transfer away at Dilson Milano. That's great. Give us a new contract. That's how these things work. I'm not saying that's what happened here, but like, I know enough about how all these discussions work that's common. And some teams say, no, you're not getting a new contract. And then the player's unhappy, and then things get weird. So well done on Charlotte to get that deal done. The next point for Charlotte, Scott Arfield, I know I reported it over the last couple of days. He's leaving Charlotte. He has left Charlotte. He wasn't in training yesterday. I'm told that destination is Bolton Wanderers in the lower leagues in England.
Whoa. A big Wanderers drop. Stu Holden throwback. Shout out to Johan Smith and the Bolton Wanderers. That was not a name I thought I was going to hear over the course of this.
I saw you had my tweet notifications on. What's going on, brother?
Clearly, I didn't. No, literally, I read the Give Me Sport article, and I literally got the
it wasn't in. No. So I reported this morning because I didn't have the team name yesterday, and then I reported this morning.
To be clear, anytime I saw the news, I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Like, I don't need to know more about this.
That's awesome.
So I move on from here. So, yeah, there you go. Wow, cool. The Malanda stuff.
Wow, cool. Yeah, that's all that needed.
In your mind, does that kill the Tim Ream move?
No. Again, this was additive. They wanted to bring in Tim Ream to add to this defense, and like it probably is it is unfair. Andrew Privet has shown he's a starting caliber level center back in this league, but their view is if we can get Tim Ream, and then again we think we have 3 starting caliber level center backs.
Gives you tactical versatility as well if you want to move in and play with wing backs and stuff like that going forward. All right, let's close out.
Sorry, last one. I forgot if I said this Tuesday or not, but just because somebody asked in the chat, Luciano Rodriguez, Charlotte, the literal line that I got from a source was that ship has sailed.
Okay. This is the same. Oh yeah, right. This is
the Uruguayan
Boca
kid.
Juniors. Yeah. The Boca Juniors is New England Revolution. That's the in 2 different conversations. As I try and scramble through all of this.
Sorry.
Weekend action coming up in MLS. So obviously I'll be back with a review show on Monday. If you are part of the Discord because you pay for the Patreon, of course you can be in there and send me all your questions about what you're watching. We will chat about the games, every game this weekend on Saturday night, which I continue to hate. So that will be really, really fun as we prep for a Sunday of Euro Copa America doubleheader. The obvious big game this weekend is LAFC against Columbus, MLS Cup rematch, best team in the Western Conference, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. To talk about some of this, and shout out to Kavoth the Raven, who's shouting us out. We appreciate we love the full circle stuff. We wanted to handicap the Supporter Shield race a little bit because I did it in the conversation on my recap show on Monday where I said, what a win for Cincinnati. I think everyone left the door too far open for Miami. Miami won 3 of 4 I believe 4 of 5 without Messi and Suarez and
correct.
friends. 3 of those on the road,
yes,
which is ridiculous over the course of this time. So they get pasted by FC Cincinnati. And I guess I leave the question to you. 1, how big is this group that you consider contenders? Like how far down do you go that you think has a legit shot? And who do you sort of see as the leader right now?
So the group of absolute pure contenders, and this is super fun. It goes 6 deep for me. Yeah. Cincinnati, who are currently leading the Shield race, Miami, LAFC, RSL, LA Galaxy, and maybe that would probably be the one that I put in 6, and maybe with RSL, and the Columbus Crew, who are starting to catch up on their games in hand, and they are level with RSL on points per game. And this is super exciting because it's not always like this. Like last year, if you remember around this time, the conversations would be, can anybody catch Cincinnati, or are they already kind of too far gone? So I hope that this race stays the way it is, and this doesn't turn into a Premier League season where we're all excited for a 3 or 4 team title race, and then Manchester City, because they're a machine, just wins 14 games in a row at the end of the season, and like Liverpool drops points in February, and in the back of your head, was that it? So I hope that it stays 6 teams deep. And I was pulling some numbers early in the week. So the average, since 2011 in the 34-game season, the average point total for a Shield winning team, 62 points. That's 1.8 points per game. All 6 of those teams are essentially surpassing that. Like the Galaxy are 1.87. So it's either all of those teams in a normal year would be like we have the inside track to win the Shield and not a 6-team race. The record points per game total is 2.14. Cincinnati are surpassing that right now, and then you have Miami and LAFC at 2.05. Like this, I don't want to jinx it. This could be a historically fun down the stretch race for the Supporter Shield because I think all of these teams are real. There are like particularly the top 3 or top 4, of Cincy, Miami, LAFC, and Columbus. Everybody has flaws, but I don't think any of these 6, but particularly those top 4, I don't think any of them are going to fade away.
And let me throw this into this. I agree with you on the 6. I think it's a bridge too far for the Galaxy. I am questioning Columbus as well. I talked about Columbus 2 weeks ago. Like, they've got the chance. The loss in Miami, I think, was massive. To like lose that midweek game when Miami had Aviles suspended and everyone else away for international, all that stuff. I think that was a mistake they couldn't afford to make. Cincinnati, to close the year, they still go to Miami, host Columbus, host LAFC. So like the fun part of so many teams being in it is like you're going to get a game like this pretty much every weekend, which is two Shields contenders facing off against each other because you have so many options. Miami goes to Columbus in the third to last week of the season. That's going to be a huge game. That's another one that's really exciting. And I think this is where you see LAFC's advantage being in the West, which is like they get one shot kind of at all these teams, and then they don't have to play most of these squads, and they can kind of pick up points from San Jose and SKC and St. Louis and teams like this, which are not easy games, but it's sort of outside of the we're in this murderer's row situation that the Eastern Conference teams are in. So it's going to be fascinating going forward. RSL, they play their next 3 on the road, and it ends with the Rocky Mountain Cup against a Colorado team. Now, Leagues Cup coming up, so all of that is bridged around Leagues Cup, and how deep you go in that tournament, I think, will affect how strong these teams are to sort of continue on the rest of the year, and it'll be interesting to see how teams judge that are sort of in this conversation. But this is 2 years ago when Philly and LAFC and Montreal went down to the wire, and like Montreal did well enough to win a Shield on the average year, and they didn't because Philly was beating teams 6-0 every week, and LAFC was putting up historic numbers. That was as fun a Shield race as we've ever had, and this has the potential to be better than that.
Yeah. I, again, co-sign all of that, and I don't think that we said it off the jump, or maybe you did, and my I wasn't paying attention. LAFC hosts Columbus this weekend, and I can't wait for that game. 10:30 Saturday night in Los Angeles. Again, MLS Cup rematch. MLS Cup was in Columbus last year, so LAFC, I'm sure, have some revenge on their mind. That's going to be super fun, and that just kind of is like they showed it on the Apple TV broadcast, I believe it was last weekend, about here are like some of these top 4 of top 5 teams. Here are all the games that they're playing against each other. And like you said, it was like, I think 8 or 9 games deep. And it's going to be super exciting. Anytime that you can have a legitimately huge game in mid-July in MLS is great. And I welcome it, and I can't wait for that game.
A reminder, LAFC played midweek Open Cup, slight rotation on a few spots. They rotated both center backs. Atuesta didn't start. Bogusz played a little bit deeper. You'd expect Hollingshead didn't start as well. It wasn't full rotation, but also they don't have to travel for this game. So they should be fine for this game. They should be fully equipped to play in this one. And as you said, a little bit of revenge on their mind in this matchup. I would expect to see the LAFC team that sits in counters because Columbus wants to be on the ball, even though LAFC is home. I worry about that less than I did last year with the way Bogusz is playing, with the way Atuesta adds a little bit of bite going forward in his aggressive passing and the way he can sort of connect and change things. And I think he opens up Bouanga in different angles to play those through balls. So Bouanga can hit you in transition in more ways now than last year, where it was like, if he doesn't get it on the sideline, there's really nowhere else he's going to pick that ball up. And that's what MLS Cup felt like. So I think LAFC are in a good moment right now for this one. No Giroud, but we're all close to that, right? The window opens in 4 days?
7 days.
Is that right?
The
7 days. So starting after that, all these players will be available. Obviously, one's playing an international competition, and all of that won't be. We have one question in the chat I want to throw at you. James Rodriguez, he was the story last night. He has had this now Shaqiri-style, move-around career over the last 7 years or something like that. Is there any MLS connection here that you'd be interested in?
Not that I know of. I wish that it would be real, but yeah. I mean, I've said this on Twitter. Feels like too many times, just repeating. I wish he would come here. Like, hey, teams that need a DP10, like Charlotte FC, that'd be pretty fun, right? They're, RSL. I don't think that he really fits with the Pablo Mastroeni X-Dog stuff, but you get my point. Nothing that I've heard though.
Okay. I'll just throw out there, nothing I've heard either. So we're both hearing the same stuff. Me and Tom are both reporting the same thing. My sources are deep, especially
sources
in Columbus.
confirmed.
So yeah. So nothing there. We of course will be back next week. I will have my weekend review coming up. on Monday as a podcast. So get into the Patreon, get into the Discord for that one, and we'll be back live 2 p.m. Eastern time next week as well. Thank you to all for listening. Thank you to Charlie Fiction, our producer behind the scenes. Thank you to Tom. I'm having fun, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon.